I wasn't expecting anything unusual that summer. It was just a favor, a simple one. Mrs. Kelsey, our neighbor from 2 houses down, was going out of town for a few days and asked if I could water her plants. That was all. Nothing more than that. She'd asked me the week before, catching me as I was getting out of my car after class. "I'll be gone from Friday through Wednesday," she said. "Just once a day in the morning would be perfect. I'll leave the back door unlocked. Hose is already set up. Shouldn't take more than 10 minutes. I told her sure, no problem. I'd known her forever, really. She was probably in her early 40s, maybe mid-40s, though she always looked younger. My mom used to say she had one of those faces that don't age. She was friendly, smart, and a little sarcastic, but always nice. Her house was quiet, decorated with plants, books, and soft light. I'd been inside once or twice growing up, usually during some barbecue or community event. Nothing ever felt weird. So Friday came and I showed up just after 9. The sun was already warming the sidewalks, the pavement shimmering faintly. I opened the backyard gate, walked around to the patio, and found the hose coiled neatly, just like she said. The sliding glass door was closed, curtains drawn. There were more plants than I remembered. Some hanging, some in large pots, others grouped around the patio edges like a little jungle. I took my time. It wasn't hard work, just quiet, peaceful. After I finished, I glanced toward the door. Everything was still. I half smiled to myself, shook off the water from my hands, and walked home. Saturday was the same. Sunday too. By Monday, I started to notice the small details. A book left open on the kitchen table, visible through the back door glass. A scarf tossed on the armrest of the couch. I realized how silent the house felt without her in it. Almost like it was waiting. I wasn't trying to be weird, just curious. Her house had a kind of atmosphere that made me slow down, pay attention. Tuesday, around the same time, I walked around the side gate and froze. The curtain was pulled back, and she was standing right there, Mrs. Kelsey. She looked surprised for half a second, then smiled. Her hair was pulled up into a messy bun. She wore a loose t-shirt and shorts, no makeup, just natural. "Oh," she said, opening the sliding glass door. "You're here. I got in late last night, changed my plans." I stammered something like "good morning" and reached for the hose. My heart was beating a little faster than usual. She laughed lightly. "Still watering the plants?" she teased. "I should have texted you." "No, it's fine," I said quickly. "I didn't know you were back." She stepped aside, letting the door stay open. "You've been doing a great job, by the way. They look better than when I left." I smiled awkwardly and started watering again. She leaned against the doorframe, sipping from a mug. "You can come inside for a bit if you want," she added casually. "Cool off. It's hot out already." I paused. "I'm okay." She nodded but didn't close the door. After I finished, I rolled the hose back up neatly. She was still there, standing with one hand resting lightly on the frame. "You're really sweet for helping," she said. "Your mom raised you right." I laughed nervously. "It's no big deal." We locked eyes for a second longer than I expected. Then she smiled again and stepped back inside. "See you tomorrow," she said, letting the curtain fall. But something lingered. Something in the way she said it. Like it wasn't just about the plants anymore. The next morning, I woke up thinking about her. Not in some obvious or dramatic way, just she was in my head. Her voice, her smile, the casual way she had leaned against the doorframe, barefoot with a coffee mug in her hand. It was the kind of image that stuck with you. Maybe it was how unfiltered it all felt, not like something rehearsed or fake. I told myself not to overthink it. I grabbed a bottle of water, threw on a t-shirt and shorts, and walked over a little earlier than usual. The gate creaked as I pushed it open. The sun was barely over the roofline, casting long shadows across her backyard. I half expected her not to be home. Maybe she'd gone out early or just decided to sleep in. But then the sliding door opened before I even reached the hose. "There you are," she said, grinning. "I was hoping I'd catch you." She was wearing loose jeans and a tank top this time, her hair still slightly damp like she'd just gotten out of the shower. She looked refreshed, relaxed, more casual than I'd ever seen her. "You really don't have to do this anymore," she said. "I'm back, remember?" "Yeah, but I figured I might as well finish the week," I offered. "You know, close the job right." She laughed. "How professional." I started to water the plants, trying not to look too much in her direction. But she stayed there, watching me, sipping from another mug. "You've always been sweet," she said after a pause. "Even when you were little, you were the only kid on the block who said, 'Thank you,' when someone gave you a popsicle." I smiled. "My mom would have killed me if I didn't." "She did good with you." The words hung in the air a little longer than they needed to. When I finished, I turned around to find her still standing in the doorway. This time, she looked at me differently, not like I was just the neighbor kid doing a chore. Her eyes were softer, more focused, curious. "You want something to drink?" she asked. "It's already getting hot." I started to shake my head, but she added, "Come in for a minute." And just like that, the line was crossed. It wasn't a dramatic moment. She didn't pull me in or look at me seductively. It was gentle, casual, but I felt it shift. The atmosphere, the invitation. I stepped inside. Her house smelled like vanilla and something floral. The air conditioning was a welcome relief. She walked ahead of me into the kitchen and opened the fridge. "Lemonade? Or water?" "Lemonade's good." She poured 2 glasses, handed me one, then leaned against the counter while I stood near the doorway. I didn't know whether to sit, to hover, to pretend this was nothing. "You look nervous," she said, smiling. "Relax. You're not being interrogated." I laughed. "I just didn't expect this. I thought you were still out of town." "Plans change." She took a sip. "Sometimes things happen that you don't see coming." She wasn't talking about the trip anymore. I knew it. My palms were sweating, but I nodded like I didn't notice. "So," she continued, "what are you up to these days?" "Still taking classes." "Yeah, general ed stuff mostly. Might transfer next year." "Not sure yet." She nodded. "College was weird for me. I changed majors 3 times." "What did you end up studying?" "Communications," she said. "But I've done everything from photography to teaching yoga. None of it stuck. I guess I just like figuring people out more than anything." That made me smile. "You seem like you'd be good at that." "I read people," she said slowly. "Always have. Like now. I can tell you're wondering why I asked you to come inside." I nearly dropped my glass. She held up a hand. "Relax. It's nothing inappropriate. I just..." She paused. "I get lonely sometimes. That's all." There it was. The first honest thread pulled loose. I didn't know what to say, so I sipped my lemonade and nodded. We stood in silence for a minute, and it wasn't awkward, just quiet. Then she said, "You can sit if you want. I'm not kicking you out." I sat on the bar stool near the island. She stayed standing, watching me over the rim of her glass. We talked for another 20 minutes about movies, music, little things. She laughed at something I said and touched my arm lightly without thinking. It was small, but I felt it everywhere. Eventually, I stood. "I should get going," I said. "I've got some stuff to do today." She nodded, walking me to the door. "Thanks for the company," she said. "You're welcome anytime." And then she added with a softer tone, "You really have grown up. You know that?" I swallowed hard. "I guess." She smiled and opened the door for me. "See you soon." I nodded. "Yeah." As I walked back down the driveway, my heart was thudding in my chest. I didn't know what just happened, but I knew this. It wasn't just about watering the plants anymore. The next 2 days passed in a strange haze. I kept reliving that moment. Her voice, the way she said, "You really have grown up," played over and over in my head like a whisper I couldn't shake. She hadn't done anything obvious. No flirting, no lines crossed. But still, something had changed. Or maybe I had changed. I wasn't sure which. Wednesday morning came, and for the first time since she'd asked me to help, I didn't go over. There was no reason to. She was home now. The job was done. But my legs still itched to walk that familiar path. My hands felt restless. I picked up my phone at least 3 times that day, tempted to send a text. Something casual. "Hope your plants are still alive." Or, "Let me know if you need help with anything else." But I stopped every time. Felt too forced. Too obvious. Thursday afternoon, around 5, I was lying on my bed when my phone buzzed. "Kelsey, you forgot your hat." "Found it by the patio." I stared at the screen for a moment. I hadn't even realized I'd left it. A plain gray baseball cap I wore when the sun got too intense. Me. "Oops. My bad. I can come grab it if you're home." "Kelsey." "Of course. Come by whenever." I didn't even hesitate. 10 minutes later, I was at her front door. She opened it with that same soft smile. This time, she was wearing a loose beige hoodie and black leggings. Her hair was in a braid, no makeup again. She looked like herself. Not dressed up, not guarded. Just real. "I was just about to make tea," she said. "You want some?" I nodded. This time, I stepped inside without waiting for the invitation. The house was quiet. The blinds were tilted just enough to let in golden early evening light. A soft playlist played from a speaker in the corner. Something acoustic, mellow. She handed me a mug and gestured to the couch. "Sit," she said. "You look tense." I sat. She curled up in the armchair across from me, tucking her legs beneath her. She watched me in a way that didn't feel intrusive. More like she was reading something in me that I hadn't quite noticed myself. "Rough week?" she asked. I shrugged. "Not really. Just weird, I guess." "Weird how?" I hesitated. "I don't know. Everything feels kind of in between. Like I'm not a kid anymore, but I'm not exactly anything else yet." She tilted her head, her expression softening. "That's a hard place to be. I remember it well." I looked at her. "Did it get easier?" "Eventually," she said. "But you have to stop looking for permission to be who you already are." I wasn't sure how to respond. No one had ever said something like that to me. We talked more about nothing and everything. I told her about school, about how I wasn't sure if I even wanted to keep going. She shared stories about her 20s, heartbreaks, jobs she hated, dreams that got left behind. It felt strange to hear her speak that openly. Not like a lecture, not like an adult teaching a lesson, just person to person. At one point, I said something that made her laugh, really laugh. She leaned forward and touched my knee without thinking. "Sorry," she said quickly, pulling her hand back. "It's okay," I replied, maybe too fast. Silence stretched between us, not awkward but full of weight. She looked down at her tea. "You remind me of someone I used to know," she said softly. "Good someone." She smiled without looking up. "Very." I set my mug down. "I should probably get going." She stood with me. For a moment, we were just two silhouettes in the living room light, her looking at me with something unspoken in her eyes, me trying to understand what it meant. As I stepped toward the door, she placed a hand gently on my arm. "You don't have to rush out next time," she said. "I didn't think there'd be a next time." Her eyes met mine. "That's up to you." I walked home that evening with a heart that felt too big for my chest. The world looked the same, the sidewalk, the trees, the fading sky, but I wasn't the same. Something had begun, and I had a feeling it wouldn't stop there. I didn't go over the next day. I wanted to. I stared at my phone all morning, even walked past her house once, telling myself I was just getting some air. But I didn't go in. I couldn't figure out if I was chasing something or running from it, and that uncertainty made me feel like I was losing control. By the evening, I gave in. I sent her a short text. "You home?" The reply came instantly. "Always." It was just one word, but it felt like a door opening. I didn't bother changing clothes. I walked over as I was, gym shorts, hoodie, old sneakers. No expectations. Or at least that's what I told myself. She opened the door with a grin. This time she looked different. Not in some glamorous way, just softer. Her hair was tied back loosely, and she was wearing a long red silk robe over what looked like a tank top and shorts underneath. The fabric shimmered slightly in the light, clinging in some places, flowing in others. It made me blink. "Come in," she said, stepping aside like it was the most natural thing in the world. I entered without a word. The house smelled like vanilla again, but something else too, like jasmine or cinnamon. The lights were low. Only the lamp by the window was on, casting a golden pool across the living room rug. "You hungry?" she asked. I shook my head. "Not really. Want a drink?" "Water's fine." She nodded and walked toward the kitchen. I sat down on the couch, exactly where I had last time. She returned with 2 glasses, one for me, one for her, and sat beside me. Not across from me, beside me. Her leg brushed mine as she tucked one foot under the other. She didn't move it. We talked again. About nothing. The weather. Music. She asked if I'd ever been in love. I asked her if she believed in it. The way she answered made me pause. "I think love is real," she said. "But most people aren't ready for what it asks of them." "What does it ask?" I asked, quieter than I meant. She turned slightly toward me. "Vulnerability. Risk. Timing." She sipped from her glass and looked down at her lap. "And sometimes," she added, "just being seen." That last line sat in the air like a weight. I didn't know what to do with it, but I felt something shift inside me. I looked at her, really looked at her, not like a neighbor or someone older, someone untouchable, just as a person. A woman sitting beside me, her robe resting delicately against her collarbone, her hands curled around a cold glass of water. She glanced up, caught me staring, and didn't look away. Instead, she smiled. "You're not a kid anymore," she said. I didn't answer. She leaned forward slightly. Her voice dropped. "I meant what I said. I know. You've grown," she whispered, almost to herself, into something unexpected. There was a pause, a breath. Then she stood. My heart jumped. She didn't say a word, just walked slowly across the room, past the hallway, and paused at the entrance to her bedroom. The door was cracked slightly open, warm light spilling through. She turned back to me, a long, unreadable look, and then, with the softest voice, she said, "If you want to come in, now's the moment." I froze, not out of fear, not even out of shock, but because I felt the world tilt on its axis. Everything normal, the streetlights outside, the ticking clock, the faint hum of the air conditioning, faded into background noise. My legs moved before I fully realized it. I stood, walked across the room, and met her at the threshold. She stepped inside, and slowly, carefully, pushed the door until it gently clicked shut. Inside her bedroom, everything felt hushed, like the walls themselves had drawn in a breath and were holding it, waiting. The room wasn't extravagant. It was warm, simple. A large bed with white sheets and a soft throw at the foot. A dresser with a few framed photos, one of a dog, another of what looked like a beach. A small diffuser glowed amber in the corner, slowly releasing the scent of something sweet and calming. She walked ahead of me, the red silk robe catching the light like it had its own heartbeat. She sat down at the edge of the bed and looked up at me, her face unreadable but open. "You don't have to stay," she said, voice low. "I know." A pause. "But I want to." That was the truth. Not driven by impulse or fantasy, but by something quieter, more rooted. Curiosity, maybe, or connection. She gave a small nod, then patted the spot beside her. I sat. The mattress dipped slightly beneath my weight, the silence stretching between us like a thread pulled tight. She didn't rush. Neither did I. Eventually, she spoke again. "You know, I've been alone in this house longer than I ever planned." I didn't say anything. I sensed she wasn't just making conversation. "When you're alone long enough," she continued, "you start to forget what it's like to be seen. Not just looked at, but really seen." She turned toward me. "That night you came over to water the plants, it wasn't just about the garden. I figured." She smiled faintly. "You didn't run away. That surprised me. I didn't want to." Her eyes flicked down to my hands, then back to my face. "You're brave." "I don't feel like it. Bravery rarely does." She reached out slowly, gently placing her hand over mine. Her touch wasn't possessive or flirtatious. It was careful, like testing the weight of something long buried. "You're young," she said, "but not stupid, and you've seen more than you let on." "Same goes for you," I said. We both smiled. Then silence again, the kind that doesn't beg to be filled. She shifted slightly, resting her shoulder against mine. The warmth of her skin, the scent of her robe, the steady rhythm of her breath. It all felt so real, so human, so present. No noise, no performance, just two people sitting in the stillness. "I'm scared sometimes," she whispered. I turned to look at her. "Of what?" She exhaled. "Of hoping." That hit me harder than I expected. "I get that," I said. "Hope's dangerous." She nodded. "But so is living without it." The light in the room dimmed a little more as the diffuser's glow began to fade. Outside, the sky was shifting, twilight settling in fully. The world beyond her window blurred. "I didn't bring you here to cross a line," she said quietly. "I just needed to feel something honest." "You did." She leaned into me a little more. I don't know where this goes, she added. Maybe nowhere. That's okay. She looked up. It doesn't scare you? I smiled. A little. But you're here. Yeah. And I meant it. It wasn't about chasing something forbidden. It wasn't about age or circumstance or fantasy. It was about feeling awake in a world that often felt numb. It was about presence and shared silence, and not running from the unfamiliar. We stayed like that for a long time, no words, no pressure. Just the quiet hum of something forming, undefined but undeniable. Eventually, she stood. I should get changed, she said gently. I nodded and stood too. I didn't feel rejected. I didn't feel dismissed. If anything, I felt more seen than I ever had before. I'll walk you out, she said. As we moved toward the door, she touched my back lightly. It wasn't seductive. It was grounding, like saying, "You're okay here." At the front door, she turned to face me again. "I'm glad you came," she said. "So am I." Her eyes held mine. "Good night," she whispered, and I stepped back into the night. Not lost, not confused, but changed. The night air felt cooler than I expected when I stepped outside. The street was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes your thoughts louder. As I walked home, I kept replaying everything. Her words, the look in her eyes, the way time seemed to slow in her presence. I didn't sleep much that night. It wasn't from restlessness or regret. It was something else, a sense that something had shifted, not just between her and me, but inside me. I felt older somehow, more grounded, like I'd crossed an invisible line, but not in the way people talk about when they mention mistakes or scandal. The next morning, I wasn't sure what would happen. Would she text? Would it all feel awkward now? Would it be easier to just pretend nothing had happened? But around 9:30, my phone buzzed. "Kelsey. Morning. Want to help me repot that sad little fern you liked?" I stared at the message for a long moment, then smiled. Me. On my way. It wasn't dramatic. No heavy declarations. No dramatic tension. Just life. Continuing. When I got to her house, she was outside already, kneeling beside a bag of soil and a cracked ceramic pot. She wore ripped jeans and a paint-stained t-shirt. Her hair was in a ponytail. She looked up and grinned as I approached. "Good. I was starting to think you forgot about my plant emergency." "Never," I said, kneeling down beside her. We worked side by side, mostly in silence, occasionally joking, occasionally catching each other's eyes and sharing a knowing glance. It was comfortable, natural. At one point, as I held the pot steady and she filled it with fresh soil, she said softly, "You're handling this better than most guys my age would." I looked at her. "Maybe you're not used to people treating you like you matter." She paused, then nodded. "Maybe." That day blended into others. I started stopping by more, sometimes for tea, sometimes just to sit on the back patio and talk. We didn't put labels on it. We didn't pretend it wasn't complicated. But we also didn't force anything to be more than it was in the moment. Some evenings we watched movies together. Sometimes we didn't speak much at all. Other times, the conversation would run so deep I'd lose track of the hours. And always, there was that feeling, a quiet understanding that what we shared didn't need to be explained to anyone else. One night, as we sat watching the sun go down, she said, "You know, I think you came along at the right time. For the plants." I joked. She smiled. "For me." I didn't reply right away, just looked out at the sky turning gold and purple. Then I said, I think maybe you came at the right time for me too. We didn't need anything more than that. No one in the neighborhood ever asked questions. Maybe they didn't notice. Maybe they didn't care. Maybe they just saw two people who'd found something rare and understood enough to leave it alone. Eventually, summer ended. I went back to school, and life started moving faster. But I still came by. Not as often, not every day, but enough. And every time I passed that garden hose, or saw the little fern thriving in its new pot, I remembered the moment everything changed. All I was supposed to do was water the plants. But sometimes, something small opens a door. And if you're willing to step through just for a minute, everything after that is never quite the same.